particular that you want to speak to today?
What we have to always talk about is, where are we going with this? The greatest opportunity always is to think about not what, but why. Why are we doing this? And it comes back all the time. What's are full of the internet? What's are full of our list? And they're the books that are really groovy to have in your fingers, and you put them up on the shelf and you feel that you've got something moving the thing forward. But the real way to move forward is always to understand the why. Henry, you've heard me talk about it over the years. What is the North Star? But it's really not a what question, it's why are you doing this? So whatever I do with people, I know that just giving them an answer is not enough. I need to work with them and keep honoring the direction. So I think the conversation ought to be why, but then blending that into a conversation of the what, the who, the hows, and whatnot. But famously spoken about is why. My very first day of training at Hopkins, presented my very first patient. For whatever reason, I remember it. I thought I was all impressive because what I said, person has these cardiac arrhythmias, abnormal heartbeats of the heart, because they have low potassium. They need this much potassium. I'm like, wow. So I was asked me, why is potassium low? I don't know. They said, well, it's great that you're going to give a person potassium. Don't you believe that it's going to be so much more helpful for the person to understand why their potassium is low? You would be able to help that person so much more. And I believe that's the question that was taught to me on day one of internship at Hopkins, is asking that question, why? But I also want to be practical about this. You can't go around, staring at the sky all day long saying, why? That would be odd and a bit aloof. So have you found any whys in your life? And where are the whys and how did they blend into you, Henry?
Putting me on the spot there. This is something for me that I actually bring up with my team a lot in professional services, which is there are a lot of times where a client asks for something and they say, I want this change to be made on my website. I want you guys to put together a plan to, processify or automate this thing that we do on a regular basis. I need help, just executing on this new software project initiative. And it's so easy in a world of client services to say, we're just going to execute on what we're asked to do. We're just, okay, they asked for X, we're going to sit down, we're going to figure out how to do X, we're going to do it to the best of our ability, and we're going to deliver X. And I always like to tell people, all right, take a step back and say, why is it that they are asking for this project? Whether it's a new website, whether it's a process, whether it's changes to something that we've implemented or some new design artifact. Because I think, honestly, more than half the time, if you sit down and you say, why are they asking for this? The solution, and you say, what is the actual problem they're solving with this request? The solution that you would recommend to that problem is sometimes completely different and is sometimes slightly different or takes a slightly different shape than what you're being asked for. And it might not be, hey, I need someone in the Philippines to sit down and audit this Excel sheet manually every week. And I could say, okay, great, I'll charge you by the hour. We'll just execute on that. Or I could say, okay, hold on. Why does the Excel sheet need auditing? Oh, well, we pull it from this software and it's not reliable. Okay, how do you audit it? Well, it's actually really quite simple. If this, then someone flags it red, and if this, then someone flags it yellow. Okay, we could probably just build a script to automate that. It'll cost you a tiny bit more on the upfront, but then you're not going to pay me hourly for eternity in order to get this executed. It's done. It's automated now. And it's those little things that if you don't ask, why are they asking me to do this? And you just go, I'm going to take care of the problem that's been put in front of me, which, is instinctual. You might not unlock that additional layer.
So what you're bringing up, which I haven't thought about, whys help refine the what, the how, the who. Many people say, it's just a series of questions, but it's actually a loop. Every once in a while, coming back, why are we doing this? So again, what you and I love to talk about, principles before that of methods. So we understand the principles of why we're asking why. We see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we're talking about health, my mindfulness teacher is often talking about this. There's content and there's context. Think about stress. Dude, I'm so upset. Can I tell you what my last week has been like? All these X, Y, and Z's that I had to keep in mind. And, I'm the one doing everybody's to-do list. But in the greater context of things, what does that mean? It's like, wow, I'm seeing what's helpful, what's no longer helpful. So I can take a bigger step back and realize that I can share these informations with people and we can learn from this. Sometimes when we are only looking at the content, we're not able to go into the life we want to be living. So there is that opportunity of taking a step back. What is that? How does that happen? It's easy to say it right now. You got to create those pauses.
Right.
And with those pauses and that awareness and that why, I think this is a part of the secret sauce because it isn't. Take these 3 vitamins, run X number of minutes per day, and drink so many glasses of water. Those are not wrong things, but how helpful can that be if we're not understanding the why, understanding the conversation of the who's, what's, how's, and refining them, and also and putting it into that conversation of really blending in. How do we put it into content, but always appreciating what is the greater context of things?
And to the point of our conversation earlier of theory versus principles,
Yes.
I think it's one of those things that's easy to say, oh, you should always contextualize. You should always try to take that step back. But what is the actual practice? And I really like your point of just throw the why question in there every once in a while. Ask, have I asked why enough today? Because that's a much easier step than saying, every time and every decision I make, do I take a step back and consider a 360-degree view of absolutely everything? Like, of course, I know I should do that, but there's that snappy, every once in a while, just sit down, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because it can bring, and you might immediately have the answer. Yeah, of course, I'm doing this because X, Y, and Z, and you're done. And sometimes you don't immediately have that answer, and that makes you pause because questions stay with you.
It's interesting. Something you may know. I recently purged a lot of my books, seeking to go digital. But as I was going through them, I was recalling a lot of people would come and say, wow, for a doctor, you have a lot of business books, lay press business books. I'm no PhD, I'm no MBA. And people said, well, why is that? I said, candidly, it's brilliant. It's psychology in a practical form. Because they usually talk about, quote unquote, how to get things done or how to do ABC, 1, 2, 3. I come from a land of theory, a land of, bullet points, but it's that conversation of how to execute. And what comes to my mind is going back to one of my earliest seminars that I sat into when I was on track to become a medical director back east, as they talked about mission, visions, and goals. And they said that it was so important that you take your time, and that's where I got hooked up. So I was trying to make it perfect. Understand, if you take a look at a mission that's well stated, in other words, the why, the North Star, like why do we exist? Why are we doing what we're doing essentially? And then every time you look at your vision, your goals, your daily operations, are you serving that greater conversation of the mission? But I see now, and I'm just kind of smiling again, that whole conversation of health and wealth, as you and I have talked about, keeps blending itself backwards and frontwards. It keeps coming into itself. So I think it's a fun conversation about honoring these things. But again, few things done well, honoring the principles. And here it is, one of the great ones, understanding the why, because it is the golden thread that moves things forward.
And I completely agree. And I think it is, to what we were talking about, I think, last week, there's a universality to how one can approach certain problems or just certain topics that is not always recognized. I mean, to your point, okay, why is a doctor doing a bunch of business books? Because it's a great pathway to psychology. The approach, as we were talking, the approach to health is very similar to the approach to wealth. There's a foundation. There are basic things you should get right. Then you can take the next step. Then you can take the next step. And where people often go wrong is, again, in the same place, and I think this is true in business as well, is you try, there's a reason you don't do the super advanced thing before you have the basic thing in place. And it's not because, people say know the rules to break the rules. And it's not because you can't break a rule without knowing the rule. It's that if you aren't following the rule 99% of the time and breaking it 1% of the time, if you're doing whatever 99% of the time and then intentionally breaking the rule 1% of the time, that whatever, what you're doing 99% of the time is going to have a bigger impact on you. You might make one great investment, but if you don't have a solid, if your money's sitting in cash in a bank account the rest of the time, that one great investment is not going to help you all that much over the course of a life. Having most of your money in the stock market, progressively, slowly building wealth, and then occasionally making that real estate transaction or that awesome trade or starting that company. Those are going to have 1,000x return for you. But if you don't have that base, there's nowhere near the level of security and likelihood of success than if you do.
Oh my man, I love that because it's so true in everything. We've talked about it. Let's talk about it again. That whole conversation of we're in this amazing longevity movement, right? We're seeing some amazing technologies and we're hearing people talk about, should I get a whole body scan? Should I get my whole genome done? Should I do cold plunging, right? And those are fascinating, fabulous conversations. And let's take a pause. Why would we look to do that? Why? Because we want to optimize our health. Well, first, second, and third, what are the things that optimize health that give you a greater broadband opportunity? And how many times I've said recently, I've had somebody talk to me about any of those tests. And I said, well, tell me about this past year. Like, what was your physician appointment like? What was, what is your standard lab panel? What is your definition of standard? What are the ways in which you bring in nutrition, exercise, sleep, and understanding stress in your life? And I'm not trying to make people squirm. I'm just wishing to do the opposite. I want people to be able to sit in the seat of their soul and enjoy their life. But it's amazing because it is so seductive to get into this conversation, right? And as we know, all that glitters isn't gold. And the first, second, and third is high yield opportunities. And we need to give ourselves permission that it's not just a checkoff box, but it really is something that's going to give us a great return on that experience or return on investment if I was in a different world.
What do you think, what is a set of principles that people can use to cut through to the most important things? I mean, you mentioned it. People want to get all these scans done. They get all these crazy things. Some of them, I mean, you've talked about certain cardiological scans and tests that everyone above a certain age should absolutely be doing that are not necessarily standard. And then there's all sorts of stuff that does anyone really need, at least at this point, without kind of some kind of pre-existing condition. How do people cut through and actually splice through for that, knowing that, the standard of care is not necessarily the right fit for them?
You use one of my favorite buzzwords, trigger words, standard of care. I love seeing standard of care. It was like this standard of care, and it's almost like we put the gauntlet down on the table when we would have a discussion back at the medical rounds. I love modern medicine. I grew up in modern medicine. I'm still a practitioner of modern medicine. It's a tool. It's not the toolkit. It is a great opportunity. Standard of care in the world we live in is a conversation about of all the resources we have and the health that we want to have. What are some of the things we can do? And it's not a right or wrong, but it's a start. And the standard of care is a conversation of a few things. Now, I would wish to just be very honest. I'm no finance expert, but my understanding is the healthcare system is bankrupt. Our healthcare system is woefully ineffective. And what is the focus? Why does our healthcare system exist? It's a discussion that's based on what is your sickness. So if you are looking at the standard of care, it is a conversation of looking at sickness and how to treat it. It doesn't talk necessarily about getting optimal health, optimal care, and those things, but the standard that you can give to a population, which, don't get me wrong, we all want to live in a great society and we want a healthy population. Kudos. But I think a lot of people that are going to lead into some of these other conversations beyond what a system will give us, if we're creating our own system, we got to go beyond the standard of care. Standard of care is just a conversation. It isn't the beginning, the middle, or the end at all. So then your question is in terms of, what are the things that we can be doing to honor this great conversation? How do we bring this into our life? What are the things that we need to be looking at? We've said them, but I wish to bring it in a new framework. What I find, because I wanted to be a school teacher before I landed in medicine. How do us adult learners learn? Repetition. So as much as I would want people to talk about their why, which we already have, it's not enough to do it once a year. So business, you guys have run beautiful companies. If you only look at your company once a year, how great of a company would you have year in and year out?
I forget it. I
Right?
mean, you can't. I mean, even once a month is, for a full review. That's probably where we're at. But anyone who has grown a business knows you got to look at your sales pipeline every day. You got to. I mean, imagine if you only checked your emails once a year. If you only
Oh yeah.
there's
Wow.
a yeah.
Oh no. What I want us to then do is talk about a few things done well. But one of those few things done well is understanding this check-in conversation, right? So quarterly, famous, monthly check-ins. Is there something that gives us an opportunity to give us feedback?
Mm.
These trackers are great. They're not medical equipment, but they give you an appreciation. Whatever you measure improves. Whatever you repeatedly measure exponentially improves. I purposely steal that from Pearson, a great engineer. Pearson's law is what they call this. About 100 years ago, it was an engineer that came up with this understanding. So if you look at your blood work once a year, wow. If you went and did quarterly blood work and have an opportunity of saying, okay, I did ABC, 1, 2, 3 during these 3 months, I got these, right? Oh, this is still an opportunity. Now I need to add X, Y, and Z. Or better yet, take a bigger step back saying, okay, I'll keep A, I'll keep B, and I'm going to take Z. And that was the way in which I find people so much helpful, is to take a pause. If you ask me what I ate 11 months ago, it's laughable. I'm not saying that we can do this every day, because then that is a huge conversation. But I think it is. And as you mentioned, some people can find it, but more frequent the better. I find personally a minimum a quarterly conversation. And having that paused in what? We need to have this awareness. Mindfulness talks about what? A direct experience in the present moment without judgment. Because easily when you review these things, oh, I have good sugar, I have bad sugar. If you're not careful, what are you going to do? You're going to judge yourself, and before you know it, you're swimming in emotions. And that's not right or wrong, but it can take you away from action. So what I do know is when I used to do healthy weight work and I would talk to people, hey, tell me how you eat. You want to know when I'm good or when I'm bad? I know instantly they are now not my conversation because they're in this when I was good, I was bad. And there's this teeter totter. If I was good, I'm going to be bad. I'm bad, maybe I can become good.
Mm-hmm.
You're swimming here. It's getting out of that. So the famous homework that was given to me that I love to share to all of us is helpful, not helpful. So once a month, your birthday repeated every month, just pause. What's helpful? And if we can focus on what is helpful, I don't like saying if, so let me say it. When we focus on what is helpful, what do we tend to do? Be aware of it. Before you know it, you set an intention, and with intentions, we start to practice something. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes progress. And no man, woman steps in the same river twice. So we need to come back to this conversation again and again. So as an individual, perhaps with a loving partner, perhaps with your team, I'm not sure the right way to do it. And it might change throughout one's life. But I want people to honor what is helpful and keep the conversation going and do this with some routine. Repetition is the hallmark of adult learners. Whatever you measure improves. Whatever you repeatedly measure exponentially improves.
One thing you said there, that teeter totter. Have I been good? Have I been bad? And it makes me think of another thing, which can be counterproductive. It's this idea of, you know, streaks. I'm trying to avoid sugar. I haven't had sugar in 3 days or 3 weeks or whatever. And then, okay, you have sugar. The there's this loss of momentum you can achieve if you focus on I haven't done X, or an X number of days, or I have done X every day for a certain number. I've worked out every day for 15 days straight, and then I missed one. Like, does that? There's this psychological impact. Now I have to start over, even though, of course, you don't. Missing a day every once in a while doesn't cause any problem, any kind of issue for you. But I think there's a people
Mhm.
focus on that, and then it becomes emotional, and it's someone's emotional response to missing a day or whatever that actually sets them back.
So well, because here's the thing: we could easily just say, "Hey, you have repetition, have all these things, and take a look at it." But I love what you're doing. We've got to make this real. What's the real thing? We can do things, and we tend to be this all or none phenomenon. So another huge part of all this, all or none, is really understandable because it's great stories. It's really that of the Hollywood version of this. And the conversation is we got to have a good sense of humor. It's not right or wrong to have a streak. And when we have a streak, let's enjoy it. And when we start a new streak, let's enjoy the next streak we're going to take a look at.
Mm-hmm.
It might be bold to say enjoy, but just take a big pause, zoom out, and say, wow, I've done all of this. And now we can recalibrate and saying, we can have that great conversation of saying, you know what, 99 out of 100 days, I did this.
Yeah.
Isn't that still pretty darn cool to say?
And it's way more important. One thing that I actually really, talk about you talk about this concept of streaks, and I think a lot of modern software and UIs get people used to, like, even every day when I kind of go on and do the Wordle in the morning, it tells me, oh, you got a 20-day streak or something, and I'm like, who cares? I missed a little puzzle. Like, why does anyone care? But there's this. I guess they've figured out that it keeps people coming back. One thing that I really like is actually, on the iPhone, the fitness app will give you these trends, and they'll tell you, okay, your activity's been going up or it's been going down, but they're 3-month trends, and it's not something you can kind of set. You can't go and say, all right, show me trends on a 1-week basis or something. So you could be like, if you're trying to up your daily caloric burn or up your daily fitness activity or something, and then you get sick and you're, super low activity for an entire week, it won't impact your trends as long as you come back, because the concept is, what is your long-term 3-month versus 12-month trend, not what is your ultra short term. Are you doing better this week than last week? And I think it forces a psychological rethinking and a realization that, oh, okay, every once in a while screwing up isn't going to hurt me at all, as long as over time I'm trending in the right direction. It gets people thinking, I think, in a better manner about that.
We just got to keep this conversation, because I think anybody hearing this right now, or as you and I hear ourselves chat and one another, is that yes, we see, yeah, perfection isn't necessarily important, but there is this psychological conversation that just sweeps up. None of us saying, you know what, I missed one day, I'm worthless, I'm terrible, I'm going to sabotage for the rest of the days. I don't think that's the intention. And if it is, we ought to talk, right? Because that's a whole nother huge opportunity to be helpful. But the real truth of the matter is that we just need to honor these pauses and keep the conversation going. I don't think anybody is going to beat up Michael Jordan for not hitting every free throw, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's up there every time. He doesn't say, I can't wait to miss this free throw. People set up with the opportunity to execute. So we need to help people keep coming up to the line, keep getting the ball in their hand, and keep the conversation going. To me, that's going to be the biggest conversation for people, because the whole truth of the matter is there's no number of win streaks that anybody can have if we're not showing up. So we got to really help people know that the greatest first win is how many times did you show up? Maybe we've missed a bigger conversation. Is it really the number of minutes or the number of times you've gone to the gym? Obviously, both are important, but you can't have minutes without showing up, right? So we need
Mm-hmm.
to really take the step back and really understand what are the most helpful metrics. Because we do something in the exercise conversation. We call it the 5-minute rule. I know other people call it the 10-minute rule. And by the way, some people love going to the gym. Some people get a rash by walking in there. There's not one or the other, right? There's many other ways to be healthy outside of the gym, but gyms are great. So we have something. I say, Henry, I need you to have something in your back pocket when you go to the gym that you can do it 5 to 10 minutes. And if you don't want to continue, you can stop. So the reason we bring that up is those days I don't feel like it, I don't want to. Ugh. So we tell people, breathe, just go. Do it for 5 minutes. Do your thing for 5 minutes. Well, I want to run them
Just
out.
go and stretch. Just say you did it.
Do 5 minutes of treadmill work, and then, okay,
Yeah.
I'm being sneaky. What tends to happen after you get through those first 5 minutes? You tend to go.
Yeah. All of that. Exactly.
But what if you don't? What's a greater number, 0 or 5? You don't need
Right.
a mathematician to quickly do that math. So what I would want us to be able to do is understand these principles of quote unquote showing up.
Mm-hmm.
For a kid, G.I. Joe, showing up is half the battle.
Yeah. And you're training yourself to get over, because I feel like there's always, okay, the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Like, what is your amygdala's first response is, how do I get out of whatever thing that, possessed me to set an alarm for 5 a.m.? And,
Wow.
I never have trouble waking up if I have a flight to catch, because it's non-negotiable, or if I have a meeting or an appointment, super early in the morning, doesn't matter, it's non-negotiable. But if I've set an early alarm because I want to get to the gym because I'm not going to be able to do it later, or I want to go for a walk, or it's something that's flexible, all of a sudden it's so much harder to get up in the morning. And training your brain to make those negotiable things non-negotiable, I think, is really valuable.
I love that. As we wrap up for today, what are 1 or 2, 3 things that we would want to highlight? Anything's come to mind for you?
But for me, back to the beginning of the conversation, ask why. Just every once in a while in the day, ask why. Why am I doing this? Why is this important? Why has this been asked of me? And in having answered that why question, should I be doing anything differently?
And I want to riff off that. I would want people to make asking why something that comes into their life easier. And the easiest way to do that is first creating some of these pauses or just finding opportunities. We don't have to have a big board meeting for 3 hours to understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
Whys can come
Mm-hmm.
through in drops, they can come in flows into the river. But I think asking the why, but the little magic is creating time and space, and we don't have to be perfect in terms of creating a session of why.
I agree with that. And that kind of ties in, I guess, to the last point at the end of the conversation, which is a little is more than nothing. And we get caught up in, I have to get 8 hours of sleep, I have to get 30 minutes of exercise, I have to, never eat this, and this, and always eat this, and this. And, instead of focusing on the binaries, did I check the box or did I not check the box? Focus on how much, think of it as a sine wave. How much closer to up versus down am I? Try to stay up more frequently.
I love that. I love that. Cheers, man. Cheers.
All right.